Thank you for my opportunity to share with you something that's on my heart, which is dementia caregiving. And tonight I'm going to talk about 5 habits of successful caregivers. But before I get into that, I'm going to give just a real quick introduction about who I am and how this happened. My husband and I were living in Madison at the time. I was working as a tax auditor for the state of Wisconsin. And while we were in Wisconsin, my father died unexpectedly. And then when my sisters and I were trying to help her, we realized that she couldn't live on her own, which we knew that she was having some problems, but we were not aware of the depth of the problems that she had. So being that our 2 sons had moved out of the house and we had 2 empty rooms, well, it just seemed to make sense that she could move in with us. She had been a registered dietitian who audited hospitals and nursing homes for the state of New York. She was intelligent, articulate, outgoing, the great network of the family, and I figured she's just going to do great. And she didn't. I thought, well, maybe it's just because, well, that's a big change. I mean, she'd been with her husband for 50 years. She moved from New York State to Wisconsin. I thought, well, maybe in time she's going to get better. No, she didn't. So I was working full-time, Ralph was working full-time, and we were kind of feeling our way, and we also had some other relatives that ended up with some caregiving challenges. And when my mom died 6 years later, we did find a great assisted living facility for her. I still had very many questions that I just didn't have good answers for and didn't have the time to find the answers. Then Ralph got laid off. He got a job here in Dubuque, Iowa. We fell in love with the place, and we like Iowa. And I couldn't get a job as a tax auditor. Of course, I'm not in Des Moines, so all those jobs are probably down there. So the idea came, well, why don't I research and start finding my answers? So I spent over 3 years reading every book on dementia caregiving I could find. I would read research articles, and I began to find answers, and I found them. I would go, oh, if only I had known. Oh, people need to know this. So that's how this came about. So more than 4 years later, I started really working on it in 2014, late last year. And so that's how the book happened. And I was talking to Bob about the kind of topic we could talk about, because there's a lot of topics that you can cover. And we were talking about caregiving. And I had come up with 5 things that I noticed for the more successful caregivers, what they did, what they were thinking. It's more about having the mindset so that you can handle this job, because we can be caregivers to our loved ones who are in a medical crisis of some kind. So we're going to go over the 5 habits, make sure this is on, put it on, of successful caregivers. We'll go with the first one. So first we're going to talk about what is a caregiver. When I'm talking about caregiving, I'm talking about a family member or a friend who steps in to help someone that's close to them, someone that they really care about, who is going through some kind of a crisis in their life, an illness, an injury, or a disability. So it's something that's significant enough that it's going to make a change in their life, and because we're part of them, it's going to make a change in our life too. It's often unannounced and unexpected. Good example is John Erickson Tata. She never expected to be a quadriplegic, but yet that created a need for caregivers to come alongside and help her. And it might often be for the long term. It's not always, but it can be for the long term, and that's something that we have to keep in mind when we're thinking about whether we can do this or not. All right, and so for the broad outline of tonight, these are the 5 habits, just in the short. Now I'm going to go through and explain each one in detail. We have to accept the reality of what has happened. We have to develop strategies. We have to take on the caregiving role. Develop a support network, because one of the easiest mistakes to make when you're in the midst of it is isolating yourself and not getting that support network. Everyone needs help. And then find ways to take care of yourself. You, a caregiver, are just as important as this person or loved one that you're trying to help, and you must keep that in mind, because if you're not doing well, you're caregiving, you're going to really struggle with being able to do a good job at caregiving. So first we're going to look at accept the situation. Isn't denial kind of our first response to something really bad happening? It is a psychological mechanism that kind of helps us wrap our head around it to eventually where we come to the place where we go, yes, this really is reality. Dementia in many ways is one of the easiest ones to have denial with, because for some it can come on so slowly. In fact, one of the things they say about the easiest way to know if your loved one has Alzheimer's is to realize that a year ago they could actually read a newspaper and talk with you about it, and today they can't. But yet while you're in the midst of that year, you did not see it. And then they're also struggling with denial as well. But before we can really be an effective caregiver, we have to accept the reality of this new situation, especially when it comes to dementia, because our loved one is going to change how they act, what they can do, how they can respond to us. If we have accepted this reality, then we're going to be less likely to be angry, upset, or feel so hurt. Like we had one relative who accused us of terrible things, even though we had really tried to help them. And then we were hurt and almost fractured the family. If we had known at the time that she was knee-deep in Alzheimer's, we would have reacted much differently. Another problem is trying to get a diagnosis. It's very hard to get a really good diagnosis with dementia. I don't know if any of you also have just had to deal with any other neurological diseases are very hard to diagnose. But especially for the diseases that cause dementia, there is no blood test. There is no nice little simple scan they can give that can say, "Oop, you've got Lewy body dementia, and this is how it's going to go." All they can do is they can do a little 10-minute test in the office with the doctor. We'll ask a few questions, ask them to draw a clock, do a few other things. And then they'll look at symptoms, and then they'll try to match that to which disease it might be. It's even more confusing with dementia because many people with dementia will have more than one disease giving them dementia. So my mother had vascular cognitive impairment with Alzheimer's. So we had the two working together, which is probably why years past the doctor told her, "You don't have Alzheimer's." Okay, Mom, you said you don't have it. Maybe you're okay. So one of the things we do, get on the internet, find what books we can find about trying to find an idea of what's going on. Because sometimes cognitive difficulties can come on when our body is stressed. But yet once that stress point is relieved, sometimes, we'll recover. We'll be okay. And so we need to educate ourselves. So that's what my first chapter is. What is it? Is it normal brain aging? Is it dementia? And what could it be? And where is it going? So before we talk about strategy, I want to answer a question. What is strategy? Now, it started off as a military term. It basically means developing a plan to reach a goal. Now, we all know how well a trip will go if we don't really know where we're going. I just want to go find a restaurant, but you don't know where it is. This doesn't work very well. So it is very important for us to be a good caregiver is to know the lay of the land and to have a goal. To the next one there. So we have to develop a strategy. So we're at the point where we've accepted it. We've kind of narrowed it down to what we think it is. And now we're going to try to develop a strategy because we have to figure out if we truly can, if we have what it would take to be able to be this caregiver for our loved one. Back to more education. Now we really have to look at it. So if someone has, let's say the doctor says, well, I think you have frontotemporal dementia, or that your husband has frontotemporal dementia. Well, now you can go to the website. Actually, the frontotemporal degeneration, the Association for FTD has an excellent website. So you go on more education, you get more detail. needs of your loved one, kind of get an idea of the overview of what the progression is going to be like, so that you can start thinking about what is this going to look like. When it comes to dementia, it's long-term, it's terminal. And when my mom first moved in with us, she was able to learn the city streets of Oregon, Wisconsin. She was able to drive to the store. It was a very simple, quiet town, very little traffic. It worked for her. She was able to keep track of things on a calendar, be ready for events. It would have seemed impossible for me to really comprehend that within 5 years she would be at end-stage dementia, would not know anything about the weather, would have to practically be walked through her day. And so that's why it's good for us to get that education, to have an understanding of what it is we're facing and what it might entail. And I do cover that through each stage. I go through the mild and the middle and the late. Things to know, things to do, things to be aware of. As we're going along, we're going to develop a goal. So a good example is, bring up Johnny Erickson Tada again. How many of you are aware of who she is? She does Johnny and Friends. And she was, 17? She had a spinal cord injury, and she became a quadriplegic. So a reasonable goal would not be that after 2 years of rehab, you're going to be walking. No, a reasonable goal was something quite different. So for me, as I'm realizing with my mom that my mom wasn't getting better, the only thing we could do was try to slow down her, the decrease of her deficits. So my end game was, my goal always was dementia, because the encouraging thing is that we can make a difference, especially with dementia. One of the best treatments is loving, nurture, and care. We can make a difference. We can help our loved one live well. And there is a lot of life to be lived in the midst of this. It's not like you're going to just curl up, but you can keep on doing many things for a long time. And then develop realistic options for meeting that goal. And this is one of the things we need to be aware of, is that because we just don't really know the exact pathway our loved one will take with dementia or with some of these other diseases, is that we have to be very careful what we promise. Today there are many different options for residential facilities, for home health care, for respite care. So the best thing we can promise them is, I am going to do the best I can to help you. I am not going to abandon you. I'm going to be there for you. But we can't definitively say, I will never, ever have you live in assisted living. I will never, ever do this or do that. So we need to assure them that we will be there for them, whatever is best for them. Okay, then once we've gone through and developed our strategy, once we've figured out where we need to go and have some idea of how we're going to get there, now we have to do the process of taking on the caregiver role. With dementia, it can be pretty awkward. My mom, who had been my best supporter and best friend, was my great encourager. Now I'm having to encourage her. She's not complimenting me. She's not interested in what I'm into. That's okay. I can be interested in where she's at. So we accept the task, we're going to map our strategy, and we're going to take on the caregiver role. And a caregiver role doesn't necessarily mean that we have to do every single thing. What that means is that we're the executive manager. We're going to marshal the best resources we can for our loved one to make sure that they've got what they need. My mom moved in with my husband and I. We were both working full time. She was outgoing and gregarious, and then she was home all alone. Of course, we would come home from work and she'd cling to us because she didn't have anyone to talk to, or she'd drive up to Walgreens and bother the pharmacy techs most of the day. But I had to be willing to take on the caregiving role and set aside the former role. And so one example that came to my mind that happened in our for a while, Ralph and I lived up in northern Canada as missionaries. And we had to homeschool the kids. So while I'm doing the dishes and doing breakfast, I'm mom. Once our school day started, I'm not mom, I'm teacher. You're going to do that. You didn't do it well enough. You're going to do it again. So when we're taking on the caregiving role, we have to accept the fact that our loved one might not be able to respond to us the way we had in the past. And it's okay. If a spouse develops frontotemporal dementia, their brain might not be able to pick up the cues to know that we're hurting and that we need comfort. They are truly no longer able to comfort us or be, loving to us back. It's not a choice. You can blame the disease. They would never be doing that if they didn't have that dementia. We have to keep that in mind. There are times where we will have to be the caregiver and not the sister or the mom or the brother or the son. We have to keep our goal and strategy in mind even throughout the day. With dementia, if we can help our loved ones stay calm, if we can help her feel secure and safe, that's a good day. That's our goal. Okay, so maybe she couldn't go to quilting and quilt up like she used to be able to. Maybe she can't cook or make that great recipe she used to make. Well, maybe a good day now is if we help her get it in the oven and get it out. So we do what we can to keep our goal in mind. We also have to implement what is best for both the loved one and the caregiver. And this is where to make decisions. So as my mom was not doing well at our home, we found that she did better at assisted living. And at first I felt a little guilty because I'm thinking, well, did I do something wrong? Have I shirked my responsibility? So I went in to visit her after work one day, and her back was just all messed up, and she was in a lot of pain. I tried to help her. I made it worse. So I ran out into the hall, and I found an aide. She came in, and she had my mom just comfortable and feeling just great within a few seconds. Okay. They know what they're doing. I would have the time now to make sure that I could take her to all the go to the zoo with the grandkids, and we went on a ton of adventures while we could. I was there, but I was also there at the facility making sure that she was getting what she needed. When she could no longer eat hard food anymore, I had to make sure that they changed the diet so that she'd be able to handle that. So we're going to implement what is best for both. And sometimes those are hard decisions to make. But we have to keep in mind that the caregiver has to decide what is best for the loved one and the caregiver. All right. One thing we have to do is to develop a support network. I know, especially as many of us know about volunteering and how important it is, especially for our free democratic rights, how important it is for us to volunteer. We can't do it alone. When it comes to full-time caregiving, we need to develop a support network. No one can give care 24/7, day in and day out. So the first, of course, is look for family. But we also have to because when someone gets a severe illness or injury, some of our family members will have great difficulty with this. Years ago, one of my cousins developed a severe case of multiple sclerosis. She was in her mid-20s, and it was a very aggressive form of it. And within a few years, she was in a nursing home, and I think she died in her early 30s. Her brother was so traumatized by the fact that his beautiful sister was living in a nursing home with MS, he could not even begin to visit her. We have to accept that. If we have family members who are not willing to come alongside and help us, like let's say one of our parents has dementia and our brother just can't get involved, we need to accept that and move on. We need to accept the help that our loved ones around us are willing to give. Then we also look at friends or our church or there are people out there who are willing to volunteer and who love to visit. While my mom was in hospice, there was a wonderful volunteer, didn't know us at all, who would come and visit her regularly, and it really, really helped her a lot. Also look at community resources, the senior center. Also look at, start with your medical doctor to see what's available. And remember, the choices might not mean that the best care can be done at home. So you have to keep your eyes open for the different options so that you know that that care that you can make sure happen does occur. And then the fifth point is that the caregiver has to take time for themselves because, especially if it's full-time care. Ralph's mom was able to take care of his father at home for a long time. And he didn't have dementia, but he had some pretty significant medical situations as he was aging. And she was very gifted with that. It's like she would have made a great RN. She was very good at that, very able. But she needed people to come alongside and help her. So one of the ways we were able to help her is that if she ever had any problems, she would call us, sometimes 11 o'clock down the VA if something happened. But we were there to support her. And so if you know someone who is a full-time caregiver, and you see a place where you can help, offer, see to accept your help. Just mowing the lawn, helping to, do some deep cleaning, things like that. Because the caregiver has to be aware of burnout and isolation, especially if someone's at home alone taking care of their loved one in the house. It's very isolating. They need to work and plan to find time to get away, to get back to some of their hobbies, to go and play tennis, even just go to the Y and swim some laps, things that can help them decompress and to refresh so that when they come back, they can be a better caregiver. You want to be aware of burnout. Burnout is where, you realize that you just can't do it anymore. Having trouble getting proper sleep, having trouble eating properly, having a hard time staying emotionally calm. Those are one of the signs. The other one is where your thinking starts getting into this cycle of helplessness and hopelessness, where if someone gives you a suggestion, nothing seems to be a good enough answer. It's never going to work. So when you start getting into that is your time to get some respite care. Most of the residential facilities will have some kind of respite care program. My husband and I needed to go on our annual vacation. We had planned it before Mom even moved in with us. So we found the Sienna Crest. She was able to go in there for the week while we were on our vacation. And she ended up finding out that that's how she realized that would be a good place for her. So would beware of burnout and isolation. Look for ways to stay involved other than the caregiving. Everyone needs a break from time to time. And when asking for help, be specific. The first time Ralph and I realized that my mother-in-law was having issues is that we went to drop something off her to see her, and then she just started on and us. You've abandoned me. I need help. Okay, Mom. So we actually had a really long conversation with her. Sat down, asked her some questions, tried to find out what was going on. And then we're trying to find out, well, what can we do for you? Well, I can't handle this anymore. I need help. So we finally got out some of the things that we could do for her. And one of those was, we have our phone any time of the day or night, you call us. If you have any problems, what can we do for you? And so if you find yourself needing help, think about specific things that people can do for you. Accept the answer if they cannot, because some people are a little reluctant to help, but in time you'll find out who are the ones who are willing to come alongside, and there'll be some real precious people that you will remember and be very thankful for. All right, so I'm going to go to the resources page. Now, besides the websites on specific conditions, and the web is good for that for your first level, very surfacey kind of information, there is a Family Caregiver Allowance that is, Alliance, not allowance, excuse me, it has basic resources for caregivers, and they have a lot of these points about finding respite care, getting help, finding support groups, things like that. And be willing to share your burdens with those willing to listen. Many days I would go from work to Sienna Crest to visit my mom, then go home, and Ralph would be my listening ear. Sometimes caregivers just need a little listening ear. They don't necessarily need you to fix their problems. I know I've made that mistake if someone's trying to share with me and trying to fix their problem. They just needed someone to listen. Because sometimes when I would go ask the aides at Sienna Crest why Mom was doing what she was doing, that's okay, it's normal, they all do it. Really? Oh, it's okay. Because sometimes with dementia, they'll pick up some habits or cues or things that they're not dangerous, there's nothing wrong with it. It's just not what we're used to. It's okay. And here's the other one on the flip side of it, helping a caregiver. Be supportive and understanding. It's a very intense time to be a full-time caregiver. Look for little ways to help. Even if it's little, it means a lot. I have 3 sisters, and I really was thrilled that I was in the position to help my mom. We had lived in northern Canada for a long time. We had lived far away from her, and now I was able to help her. But my 3 sisters were fantastic. I could call on the phone and talk with them. They came up and visited. It was such a great support. So if you have some family members that you know that are dealing with this, even if they're a long way away, call, write, help, visit from time to time. Be willing to shoulder a burden if appropriate, but don't be offended if they don't let you in. See what they say. And they always love it if you're loving and kind to the loved one. Especially with dementia, sometimes they can say some funny things or be a little different, but just love them. Just be kind. Just respond to where they're at. And the caregiver will be just very thrilled. All right, I'm going to pause here for a little bit to see if we have a little more time. Open up for any questions.